This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show.
Ride.
Nothing stirs me up more than when someone tells me I can't do something. And as a woman, it's something that I've heard a lot. Whenever I hear those words, I can't help but think, oh yeah, watch me. Joining me today is Kelly Lewis, author of Tell Her She Can't, Inspiring Stories of Unstoppable Women, which is a manifesto of every woman who has ever been told that she isn't strong enough, smart enough, or capable enough to excel. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is great. As I said before we hit record, I have started reading your book, and right away it gripped me. Your story starts off and it's so phenomenal. What was the catalyst for you writing this book?
So I think that I've had this book kind of like living within me for a really long time, because, you have ideas of what you want to create in this life, and you just don't necessarily like ever know how or when it's going to come to fruition. But I grew up in a pretty abusive environment. I was constantly told day after day that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a part of the family. I didn't belong. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't thin enough. I was too fat. I was too this. And, these kinds of like constant daily attacks on my psyche, were really infiltrating and getting in my head. And it, I was really angry for a really long time when I was growing up. And so I have this very vivid memory, which I shared in the book, of being, 11 years old, and my mother sitting me down on the bed and saying, I'm really sorry that things are the way they are in this house and in your life, but you have two choices. You can let this destroy you, or you can use it as fuel to be better than they are. And the they she was talking about was my stepfather and stepbrother. So the angry teenager me was like, screw you. I actually have option 3. This isn't your fault. Like, you put me in this situation, But it took me a long time, I think, to really understand what she was saying. And then also at the same time, right then and there, when those words were shared with me, I really realized, like, I have the power to decide how I carry this, how far I carry this, how far I let it limit me, and how far I choose to go in my life. And so right then and there, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let these jerks hold me back and convince me that I can't do things, that I'm not good enough. And in fact, I am going to like turn all of this into some source of fuel so I can prove to them, prove to myself that I'm better, that I'm going to be more successful, that I'm going to be more happy, that like I'm not who they say that I am. And that's really hard to understand when you're 11 years old. It's hard to understand when you're 35. So,
Yeah, and
It's
that
been a
was the thing
lifelong
is,
process.
reading that beginning of the book where you're sharing those interactions that you had with your stepfather and your stepbrother, on one hand you're sitting there, you want to scream like, why are you not protecting her? And then, eh, at age 11, you had the wisdom when your mother sat down on your bed to say, to understand that, hey, wait a second, she's in this shitty situation as well. She doesn't
Yeah,
know how to come out of it. And I
totally.
think that's a lot of insight for an 11-year-old.
It is. Yeah. I mean, to suddenly realize, like, I don't know if you have this memory, but there's like that moment where you realize that your parents are people. Like, they're not just your mom, but like, my mother is a woman who's in a relationship with circumstances that I can't understand because I don't have to pay the bills. I'm not buying food for the house. Like, you know, being a child means you're protected from a lot of those decisions, but I wasn't protected from a lot of other things that were happening. And that was really hard. I was really angry for a really long time. And then, as soon as I graduated high school and I moved out 3 days later, like I literally was like, peace, bye, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And I flew across the country because I grew up in Hawaii and I flew to Arizona. And, I was like, I'm never looking back. I'm never looking back. And I really never did. I never moved back in with my family. I saw them, pretty briefly. I think the process of writing this book has really helped my relationship with my mother. She actually finally in February got divorced. So, I mean, to this day, they were married. So it's been healing in a lot of ways. And it was also so hard to relive it. And like there were moments of writing this where I was just like I'd have to just get up and go eat peanut butter, like I can't, like I just gotta like change my focus. But then as I started to sit down and write my story, I also started to realize like, yeah, my story, my childhood sucked, but it isn't all that unique, unfortunately, because a lot of really strong women that I know had really difficult things that they overcame in childhood or in adulthood. And, so I started thinking about adversity and struggle and overcoming and the sheer badassery of women to endure all of this because so often the burden is placed on us. And so I started reaching out to some women that I knew who had gone through things. And then from there, the project just kind of escalated. And I was talking to them like, hey, who told you that you can't do things? This happened to you too. Tell me how you got through it. And then they would introduce me to other women who introduced me to other women. And before I knew it, I mean, it was March 2020. We were in the thick of the pandemic lockdown. And I was like, all right, I guess because I can't do anything in my regular business because I work in women's travel, and travel was totally shut down. I was like, I'm going to spend my time talking to awesome women about the things that they've gone through. And I met so many cool women. I talked to probably 100 different women for like an hour each. So really, we were just like chatting, and I chose 35 really exceptional stories for the Tell Her She Can't book. Um, and yeah, putting it together, I realized like, my gosh, we really are all in this together. Like we might have totally different struggles. Like I'll never know what it's like to, I mean, knock on wood, I'll never know what it's like to, have a limb amputated, or I'll never know what it's like to walk across Antarctica because that's something I'm never going to do. But like to hear all of these just beautiful humans get through these kinds of difficult times and the ways in which they use their struggles to not only empower themselves but to help empower others is really like transformative for me, and it just was such a magical project from the beginning.
So for you, was writing the book, was that sort of the, no pun intended, but closing the final chapter on that part of your life?
Totally. And I didn't even know that I was doing that, like at the time, because you're just writing it out. But then I was talking to all of these different ladies and I was like, gosh, like this is really the healing. Like this is the closing of that trauma loop for me. And, and they been in various stages of closing their own loops. And generally what I found is that in trying to heal yourself or to close a trauma loop, what you need to get to is the stage where it has meaning, right? So, like for me, all of this stuff could go into a project that had meaning that could help others. And so often I found, with the ladies that I had spoken to who are in the book, they had done the same thing. So, one woman that I spoke to, she had childhood leukemia, and she, as an adult, started volunteering in adult oncology centers. But then when she got there, she was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, because in the pediatric wing, like, they have clowns and visitors and art and activities, and adult oncology centers were so drab and lifeless. And so she decided to take everything that she had lived through and create a nonprofit that brings art and music to adult oncology centers. So, like, she closed her own loop by creating something that supports other people going through the things that she already went through. So it's just, it, like, when you can get to that level, I feel like that's the highest level of healing. It's like you lived through it, you grieved through it, you got through it, and now you're using it to help, inspire or lend a hand to others.
In all your conversations with these women, did you find any common threads about, whether it's caricature traits or how they got through it? Did you find any common ground with everything?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think there was a lot of things that I noticed, consistencies that I noticed, unfortunately, in like the education space, like teachers and professors being some of the first people to say that like they can't do things, which really I was super surprised by, because, I didn't have the greatest teachers, but I don't remember being held back. But there were so many stories that I heard like that, which really broke my heart. Um, you know, a lot of it comes down to either, modeling your life after what you don't want, like, which is kind of where I came from, was like, I know I don't want to live like this. I don't want to have a family like this. This is not what my life is going to be. Or, trying to model your life after someone that you admire. So, I know a lot of the women in the book who went through things, they really built up a supportive network, even if it was just one or two people who really did have their back and like would cheer them on. Because, and I think you just need to have that, because the world for some reason always tries to tell us that we can't do things. And other people who love us will say it, and they don't even mean to like give us the impact that they end up giving us, right? Like sometimes they're just like, oh, I just don't think you should do that because it's going to cost a lot of money and you might not get it back, or I don't want to see you be disappointed. But in our heads, if we're looking for feedback from everyone else, it's like, it's really easy to not ever do the things that you want to do, right? So, like, for example, one of the ladies in the book, she started a chain of restaurants that do healthy food through drive-through windows. And so she was like, I think this is a great idea. And everyone around her was like, if it could be done, don't you think McDonald's would have done it? Like, if it could be done, don't you think that like it would have been done by someone else? And she's like, no, because like I'm the one that's supposed to do it, right? So, but she did have, I mean, and she went through 8 years of people telling her that. But she did have her husband and like one other good friend who was like, we're in on this. Like, this is a great idea. Keep going. And so I think it's really important, if you can't, to learn how to build that up in yourself. And if that doesn't come naturally to you, to at least have like one super supportive person that's going to be like, go for it, you can do it. Or to find a community online, even of people who are doing it. And I think that's pretty paramount.
And I think there's a bit of a difference in why people tell you you can't do something. Um, as a parent, we have two adult children. Um, it's not that we try to never tell our kids what they can and can't do. It's more cautioning them of things that they should look out for. So I think there's a bit of a difference
Yeah.
between those people that are cautioning you because they're afraid that you're going to lose money, get your feelings hurt. That's, as a parent, that's what we do. We want to protect our kids. We don't want them to go through pain. So we say and do things thinking we're protecting them. Inadvertently, we could be causing them more harm. And then on
Yeah,
the other hand, you have those naysayers. We call them haters. Those people that are just going to shoot you down because they feel shitty about themselves.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes from like inner perspectives because even when we're telling people because we love them, like, oh, I don't want to see you get hurt. I don't want to see you feel bad. I don't want to see you quote unquote fail. Like that it comes from good intentions, but could also be depriving the world from something great, right? Because that person might listen to you and be like, you're right, it does seem like a lot, right? Because any like big idea is going to require a lot. So it's a fine line, I think, when it comes to like our children and being really encouraging and just being like, okay, so here's what could happen if it doesn't go your way, and here's what you'll learn either way. I mean, maybe that's a better way of being like of approaching a situation if a child is coming to you and saying like, hey mom, I want to play professional basketball, or like whatever super competitive thing that might seem like a long shot for you. I think there's a way to be encouraging without being like, I don't think you can do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And our oldest, I swear that kid came out of the womb knowing what he was wanted to do with his life. He is so into the movie industry. That's his thing. Writes, directs, at everything. So going through school in our small rural community in Nova Scotia, um, teachers looked at him and go, okay, now you have to think of a real job.
Yeah.
Like you can't have that as a goal. And I went back to them, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
If the kid wants to make movies, he'll make movies. He'll make
That's right.
movies.
That's right.
And
Good.
but it's true, it does come from the teachers because
Mm.
they think that they're teaching the kids to live in reality. But you know what? The movie directors, the Amazon creators, the PayPal creators, they all just started as some kid in grade 2.
Yeah. And what the hell is reality? Like it's constantly moving. We're constantly creating it. So like anything is possible. You know what I mean? And I mean, sometimes I have never in entrepreneurship followed a linear line. Like I created the world's first series of guidebooks for women in 2010 with no instruction or idea what I was doing, no history in publishing or guidebooks. But it's like you just have an idea and you have to figure it out. And I made a gazillion mistakes along the way, but I just was determined to do it the way that I wanted to do it. And I think it's that stubbornness inside of me that probably comes from a lifetime of being like, I'm not like that, I'm like this, or like, just you watch, just you wait and see. And I'm glad that I had that tenacity. It just kind of sucks that it had to come from a place of struggle that I had to build it up. But at the same time, like, would I be the same had I not lived that experience? And would my travels around the world, because it's like, so once I graduated and I moved on, I started working in journalism and then I started traveling, and I've seen every continent on this planet, and like that has changed my life. And so it's like in my desire to just be away, to just be far away, and just to see things on my own, I ended up creating this beautiful life full of travel and you know having so many like awesome women friends that I met at the Women's Travel Fest, which I created with no conference experience, or, Damesley, which I created with no industry tour experience. So it's like, you just got to go out there and do it. And like, just not listen to anyone who tells you that you can't do it. Cause it's like, you will figure out a way, you just have to pursue it endlessly.
So what was the biggest thing after you left home that somebody told you that you couldn't do that you went out and did anyways?
Oh boy. Um, I mean, I think when I was starting my first business and I was 23, people were like, women don't need their own guidebooks. Like, you don't know how to make a guidebook, and guidebooks never make any money. And, you can't get this into bookstores, and like just all these kinds of things. And it did make me question it and maybe be like, maybe you're right. Like, maybe guidebooks don't make any money, which they don't. Maybe women don't need their guidebooks, but they do. But I just was like, screw it, let's see what happens, because worst case scenario, I lose a little bit of money and a little bit of time, but I've learned new skills in like pursuing this thing that I wanted to pursue. But I feel like I'm told that I can't pretty frequently in like small and big ways, like you can't drive 6 hours. That's too far. Like, why would you do that? I mean? It's just like it comes up all the time. And now that I've written this book, I'm like hyper aware of when people say that I can't do things and what they're trying to tell me. And usually I can see now it's almost like a mirror effect. Like, I can see this is your stuff that you're just like pushing on me. Like, you might not want to drive 6 hours. You might not want to create a guidebook, but like, I'm on my path and you're on your path. So you just have to, with love, be like, thank you for your input. I'm going to keep going down what I think is best for me.
I think that's a very important point, is a lot of the time those naysayers are just spewing their own garbage on you. And
Yep.
it's to be able to take that pause, step back and go, that's about you. This isn't me.
Yep. I mean, and how we all are raised, we all carry our own kind of stories that we play out through our life. If you grew up, you know, in poverty, or with this like fear of lack, that you carry around with you, then like anytime anyone does something risky or what seems expensive or extravagant, I mean, it triggers you. So you speak from your own point of view, but what you don't always realize is how and where those words land for others. And so, this book was written for the others, just to be like, listen, the world around you is going to tell you what they think is best for you constantly. And like the best thing that you can do is get centered, build up your support network, and really pursue what you want to do, because you have this one life and it's up to you and it's in your hands. And I think that's the other thing, and I'm so thankful I had that lesson at 11 years old. But so often we go through life, and life, it just kicks us and it throws us and it pushes us, and you're just kind of going through the motions, and you're working a job you don't really love but it pays the bills, or you're just doing life because life is doing to you. But then you can step back and realize, like, wait a minute, I have all the power here. If I want to quit tomorrow, I can. It might suck for a little bit, it might be hard, it might be difficult, we might scrounge for a little bit, but I will figure it out. And like that realization just opens up so many different doors. And so I think above all, it's like, you are not the passenger of life, you are its pilot. And I want to really instill that, like, as far and wide as I can, because for so long I felt like I couldn't control what my life was going to give me. And now it's like, no, I can control everything. Like, and the things that I don't like, I can just like, I can remove people who aren't a good fit for me or who don't support me in the ways that I need them to. I can limit what I share with them. I can still love them and not be like, they cannot be the person that I go to when I have a first idea that I'm still working out, like, it's just so complex, because it's everyone's coming from their own perspectives, but like at the end of the day, like, you are in charge of your life. And that is something that I really needed to learn, and I'm glad that I learned early on.
Yes, it took me a longer to learn that I had the power to choose. So I'm always I always admire when I see people learn this earlier on, sooner than I did. And now you were saying that your main career is organizing women's travel.
Yes. So I've been working in the women's travel industry for, since my guidebook, so 12 years. And I've been running a conference called Women's Travel Fest for the past 9 years. And it's so awesome. It's like 400 women every year. It sells out every year. It's amazing. We have incredible sponsors like Uber and American Airlines. And I mean, it's just so much fun because everyone's there to really share in a passion, which is travel. And then I started running women's tours, small group tours to different places. So actually, next month, I'm going to be leading 2 back-to-back trips, one to Morocco and one to Egypt. So, it's then that's another thing that happened, right? It's like I didn't necessarily know what path my life was going to give me. I just knew that I had to keep going. And, guidebooks are where I started. And now, I mean, it all comes full circle. It's like I'm still writing. I'm sharing more of myself along the way because I've done more of the work on myself to be like unafraid really of other people's thoughts and opinions.
And I think that's a common thread with anybody that's been through that, personal growth journey, is that once you come out that other side, you then have that inner desire to help other people heal and grow and go through the same transformation.
Yeah, it's the last level. I mean, giving it meaning is like really how you put it all to bed. You give it a place to go. And when I was younger, I used to write poems. That was how I channeled all of the stuff that I was feeling, and I would lock myself in the bathroom because it was the only room in my house that had a lock. And I would lay on the bathroom floor and I would write poems and poems and poems and just like get it all out. But you have to give it meaning. You have to give it a place to go. So for me, it was always writing, and I think it always will be.
It definitely sounds like it's part of who you are. But no matter what you're doing, I think it's always going to involve some sort of writing.
Yeah, I'm no longer writing on the bathroom floor. Although, I mean, I guess I could for nostalgia's sake. But yeah, now it's just, I I got comfortable enough with myself to share my story, which was scary and gave me a lot of anxiety before the book came out. But now that it's out, it's like I hear these amazing stories. I get these emails from women who are like, I was told that I would never walk again, and now I'm running marathons, or I was told I would never play basketball professionally, and I'm the starting blah 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 for University of Minnesota. I'm just, and hearing all these stories is like yes, keep going. And I got an email from someone the other day who was like, I saw you on the news and you were saying, we have to really live our gifts because it's our obligation to the world. And she was like, and I really want to write horror, but I work in accounting. And she's like, I think I'm going to go and write the horror book. And I was like, write the horror book. Do the thing, because like you just have to. If you feel pulled to create something, like create it. Don't listen to what anyone says about it.
Well, exactly. I mean, this podcast,
Yeah,
my
yes.
my day job, I run a manufacturing company.
So cool, right?
It has absolutely nothing to do with this.
And I'm sure there was someone that was like, podcasting, huh? Like
well, that was my parents, because they don't understand what it is. But I think there's a lot of people around me weren't surprised, because I was always that kid in class. It didn't make a difference where you sat me. I'd be talking to somebody.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, I think my teachers, if they were to see me now, they'd be like, oh, now we get it.
Yeah.
That's what the girl's supposed to do.
Totally. I love this kind of stuff. I love having conversations with and podcasting is such a cool way of doing that. And I mean, certainly when you're talking about like vulnerability and like stuff that you've lived through, you really rip away all that kind of pretension and ego, and you could be like, hey, this is who I am and what I've been through. And like, you really connect with someone on like such a deeper level than if you met at like a cocktail party or something.
And yeah, and that's it. And I firmly believe that by sharing our stories, as you shared earlier, we're closing the own trauma loop, our own loop of pain and hurt. But we're also letting other people know that they're not alone. They're not alone in what they're going through. Somebody else recognizes what they're going through. And, I think the more that we reach out and we help other people, the more we'll heal on a global scale.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the more I mean, and we've come a long way, I think, as society and within gender to be like, we don't have to, like, we're not going to do all of the things that we were told we had to do in the 50s. And like, we've come a long way in that regard. But at the same time, like, we still, like, there's still so much work to do, like we still have so much further to go.
We've cleared up a lot of that gender classification that we have
Mhm.
to how we live our lives. But I think in doing that, and I think social media plays a large part of this, we've now learned how to create this facade of who we are,
Yep.
and that we're afraid to share our true selves because we're afraid of being rejected.
Mhm.
So
I totally
that's
agree.
the next barrier we have
Yeah,
to break
I mean,
down.
yeah, totally. And all that stuff, like, I live my life completely differently from how my grandmother was told she had to live her life, right? But her own like trauma and perception filter down through my dad, which filters down through me, which filter so like it still trickles down. It's still there. You just have to keep reaching deeper within to be like, nope, pulling that out, pulling that out. Like, I'm going to keep on moving because you can't carry all of other people's expectations and, society's pressure on how you should and shouldn't live. On a personal level, like I just got engaged and already, already,
Congratulations.
thank you. And we're so excited. And already society is like, you know, when are you gonna do it? Where are you gonna do it? You got to do it like this. Da, 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 da. Like, I don't know. We're just gonna do whatever feels best for us.
Do what you want.
Yeah,
That's what I told my kids.
Yes, that's how you should live. It's like do what you want. You
Do
are
what you
in
want.
charge.
If you want to
Yep.
elope. If you want to
Totally.
have a massive wedding, have a massive wedding. It's
No thanks.
your choice.
After 9 years of planning large scale events, I think I'm good.
You're like, nope, just give me a beach.
Yeah, totally.
Kelly, if any of our listeners want to dive into your story and grab a copy of your book and connect with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Totally. So the book is available anywhere books are sold. It's called Tell Her She Can't. If you're looking to connect with me, you can find me anywhere on the internet at Go Kelly Lewis.
If you're looking at connecting with Kelly, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of her links in there. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller